All right, so we're here with Christopher Hale, candidate for TNDP chair, and it's December 29th, and it's 2:33 in the afternoon. Chris, we'll let you have a brief introduction, 2 or 3 minutes. Tell us about yourself.
And to people viewing on Facebook Live, it's nice to see you. I am going to communicate to the people in front of me, so don't feel like I'm ignoring you. Thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Christopher Hale. I am from Rutherford County originally. I was born there a little under 30 years ago. Went to school there, public school there my entire childhood. Graduated there from Siegel High School. After graduation, after college, I went to go work for the President of the United States, Barack Obama. I actually began my career knocking on doors for him in an Iowa blizzard back in 2007. So he was like my first really inspiration in national politics. I also interned for my local congressman, Bart Gordon. I graduated college with a philosophy degree, an economics degree. One taught me how to think. The other one thought they taught me how to think. But I had two choices really at 22 years old. I could go into finance and make good money. I had a chance to go to New York City, or I could go into politics. And so at 22, I made a choice that's been with me ever since. In my entire career, I chose politics. I was inspired by Barack Obama, but I was particularly inspired by the historical notion of politics, or if you will, the epistemology of politics. Politics is about the care of the people in the city. And I actually want to argue that politics is a noble vocation. I believe that, and that's what I'm proud to be a politician, and I have a nobility for politics. I did 3 things for President Obama, and I think it kind of to understand my worldview. First thing I did was I represented him in legislative affairs to the House. My small alma mater, Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. Its most famous graduate is John Boehner. So John Boehner was Speaker of the House in 2011. And so I was a liaison, particularly to Republicans on the Hill. So they were in the majority at that point. But I was progressive voice in the wilderness. I knew how to operate in quote unquote missionary territory where our worldview was not always first and foremost. Then I worked on President Obama's re-elect in 2012. And I did faith outreach to evangelicals, white evangelicals, which is 40% of the state of Tennessee, which is the biggest electorate in the state. And also to Catholics, which is my faith background. Anyone who Googles me can see that. Once again, communicating progressive values and fighting for progressive ideals in missionary territory. And doing that in a way that is concise, compelling, approachable, understandable, bread and butter democratic politics. And the third thing is I came back and I worked again a little bit for the administration, but I worked in faith advocacy. I was in a nonprofit and ran a nonprofit for several years that focused on the religious left. The religious left is quite a species. We are Christian, Jew, Muslim, people of all faiths, and people of no faiths. We worked with folks of all different stripes, and we tried to work on the crucial issues of that time from a national perspective, which really were threefold. For us, it was immigration, workers, the working class, particularly $15 minimum wage. I spent my career oftentimes fighting for that, and also the protection of religious minorities. I ran the biggest faith-based response to President Trump's Muslim ban. We had over 600 young people show up at the White House within 24 hours. So I've worked in advocacy. I worked in peer politics. I've worked in nonprofit sectors. I moved back here about a year ago. I ran for Congress in the 4th Congressional District. I want to explain my worldview. I think it's really important to understand my worldview in this. I like my 2 opponents. The first opponent, Mariah Phillips, she came from the women's movement. She came from Emerge. She ended up winning the nomination. She ran for about a year and a half, so she ran for a long time. I ran for about 3 months. And then Stephen Reynolds also ran for about a year and a half. I think that I want to be a bridge builder between 2 ideologies. I think there is a false choice in the democratic politics between two camps. One is white working class, and the other is civil rights and social justice. Time and again, I think consultants tell us we choose one or the other. I think the history of Tennessee proves at its best. I think the history of the Democratic Party at its best proves that we can and must choose both. That is particularly a worldview of young Democrats in this country. We are not going to sacrifice one group's solidarity for another group's solidarity. We're going to work together because we're all in this together. At our worst, our party is a disparate group of interest group fighting for their own causes and beliefs. At our best, we work together, not with uniformity, with unity. And that's what I've done my entire life, is I've been a bridge builder who has experiencing winning elections, creating movements, creating change, bringing people together. I'm on the go. I'm visiting all 95 counties. I want to meet people in the flesh, and I'll just finish it up here so we can move on. 3 things I want to say, though. I'm not going to do backroom deals. I'm glad you're taping this. So I'm not going to promise Hamilton County special gifts to win. I don't think that's the way politics should run. I think it should be open and transparent. Number 2, I'm not going to pretend I know things I do not know. Did I read about Hamilton County? Yes. Do I have some experience on the fringes of Hamilton County with Marion County and the congressional race? Yes. And do I have this into the basic biographies of people I'm dealing with today? Yes. But I know there's a difference between knowing about, to use Spanish, conocer, and to know, saber, to know, to intimately know. And I want to be a person who learns to intimately know. And the final thing is, I think you have a very simple choice in this election. First and foremost, is the status quo working? You're wearing a Tennessee hat. If Jeremy Pruitt went 1-11 4 years in a row, he wouldn't get a 5th year. I am not a proponent of the status quo. If you're happy with where we stand as a party, I'm not your choice. I want to bring about change, and I brought numbers. You can argue with my numbers, you can argue with my details, but I'm not operating on broad stroke ideas. I have a plan, and I want to execute that plan, and I want to fight for that plan. So that's who I am. I want your hard questions.
So what made you decide to run for TNDP chair?
Sure. The biggest thing I would say is I think that we have lost a sense of the best of our party. Number one, the number one goal of a political party in the American civic tradition is to win elections. And we're not winning. And I think we're not winning not because of the demographics. I think the demographics are tough. If you look at the other southern states, they're doing way better than we are. I don't think we're not winning because we don't have good people. I don't think we have corruption writ large. I think we have good people who care about their values. I think we are missing the mechanic, the builder, the person that can be the bridge builder between the community. And I think that it's a generational issue as well. I think that a lot of the issues that we could fix is by actually going with a younger person. I don't have old fights. I don't have old ideological battles. I don't know who hates whom, and I don't care. My goal is to win elections, and I think we've lost that. We've lost a sense of optimism. We've lost a sense of vision setting. I get told time and again that our sights are set too high, but it seems to me that if I didn't run for this race and we let the current chair, who's a fine woman, and I should say that again, I have no issue with the character, the temperament, and I think in a lot of ways she did the best she could in the job she was given with Mary. But if we say we're going to re-elect the chair, are we saying yes to the death of the Democratic Party? Because we are down in the cards right now. And so I thought I was the choice to build a new way forward. And I think with my professional skill sets, my vision, my ability to communicate our party's highest deals to a diverse electorate, I think I'm the person to do that.
How long have you been active in Democratic politics in Tennessee? And what positions have you held in Democratic or allied organizations in Tennessee?
So I began my career in Tennessee politics in 2007. I was an intern for Congressman Bart Gordon. So I did that in the summer of 2007. Then my experience went beyond the state of Tennessee, and I worked in national Democratic organizations. I was part of YDA. I was part of the Young Democrats of America from 2012 to 2015. I worked in the Faith and Values Caucus. I worked in the Southern Caucus, which we had back at the time. YDA was always well supported by the DNC at writ large. And I was also involved in some capacity in 2012 with the re-elect with President Obama. Justin Wilkins led OFA Tennessee, and so I worked with Justin Wilkins in some capacity on that. And then there was organizing for action right after the 2012 election regarding, if you recall, the tax extensions, the Bush tax extensions. We had those protests. I was a part of that as well, the organizing community that went from that. And then from 2013 to 2017, I worked in the progressive faith movement. We had over 300 members in the state of Tennessee, most who were Roman Catholic. They were Catholic progressives, and we worked on a variety of issues that I mentioned beforehand. And then, of course, when I ran for office in 2018, But I want to note something. I've worked in 3 particular spheres that I think are noteworthy for this job. The movement, which anyone who understands the local politics and who's run for office, I ran for office in 16 counties in this state out of 95. We know that the movements and the Democratic Party, there's some strengths and weaknesses there. I've been on both sides. I've worked in national politics. We have a big question that maybe you'll ask me about data sharing. I've seen it from the national perspective. I've seen it from the context of running a campaign and trying to get my information. And I'm also run in both a rural and suburban setting. So I think I ran at different capacities. So if you're looking for someone who's been in the Democratic Party writ large, the TNDP, I'm not your guy. But once again, I ask yourself, I was born in 1989. The year I was born, we controlled about 86% of the state legislature. So we've had 30 years of insiders. How are things going?
Could you describe your overall personality?
I think I'm likable, but the young people call me extra. I don't know what that word means, but I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm very energetic. I'm like a recent convert with zeal. I really believe that the Democratic Party, at its best, can be a source of political, social, cultural change in this state, and I am on a mission to make that happen. I am not a boring person. People have feelings about me, good or bad, but no one would ever accuse me of not being kind and considerate, of not being willing to engage with anyone. I'll engage with friend or foe, skeptic or proponent. I am a big believer that unity does not mean uniformity. So I'm a person who makes as wide of a swath as possible of friends. That being said, I think that a party chair cannot just be the friend. She or he has to be the enforcer and make tough choices. And I think it's really important. There is only one scoreboard that matters to me as party chair, and that's to win elections. That is the purpose of the party chair. Now, you don't sacrifice. You have to make a balance. It's kind of like imagining if you're looking at like trading stock. You can't make yesterday's wins or tomorrow's wins hurt down the line. So I understand that balance between near and far, but the scoreboard's the wins, and that's what I'm here to do. So I think that you'll find me as if you're looking for someone who's not extra. Once again, I'm not your man. I think we need folks who are on fire for the party, who are passionate. I think it's actually okay that we have a politician in charge of the party because we need to inspire a new generation. And one thing I want to note, and I can give you the data on this as well. So I came in that election late in 2018. And so I got in about 65 days before early voting started. And we got about a little bit short of 12,000 votes. We knocked on 12,000 doors. We went all the way out, and we were all in. My staff's young. They're still with me to this day, fighting for me on this campaign. But what was a point of personal pride and something I want to take to the party writ large is we did a poll. We did a canvas exit poll, a survey of the results, and we won 57% of people under 40 in a three-way race. 1 in 4 of our voters had never voted in the state of Tennessee before. So I'm someone who's I have a bias. I have a bias for those who are disengaged in politics and do not like it, because those are Democrats. We have over 350,000 Democrats that I've named that if we get them to register, they're on our side, but we haven't found them yet. And I also have a bias towards new generations. And as a political bias, because I think that's the pathway to victory. And I'm an energetic person trying to get them.
Can you tell us, please, your greatest strength and your greatest weakness as a leader, specifically?
My greatest weakness, I'll go first. I think that my greatest weakness is I think my passion and zeal can make me too confident in what I see. I've said things, so in growing up, and now on the verge of 30, and if I look at that trek from through adulthood, I think that what I've had to learn the hard way, I've had some knocks, I've lost, is that I need to be considerate of all options. and not let my energy and zeal drown out the quiet voices. What's really interesting is the older I've gotten, the more I've been able to listen to the quiet voices in the room who aren't screaming necessarily, because that's oftentimes where the wisdom lies. So I think that a weakness that I think is worth considering as you consider my resume and my background is he too energetic? Is he too extra? And I think that I lay that on the table. I do want to say though that I think if the sin is between being too energetic and sometimes too prone to make mistakes and too outward going versus not taking any risk, I think we're risk takers. I would much rather, I'm going to look at the camera for this one because it's really important. I'd much rather the Democratic Party be sick from going out in the street and making mistakes than a party that's sick like ours currently is by being closed in on itself. It's like walking into an old room, an old museum, a dusty room where there hasn't been any air let in. And I'm particularly talking about the rural communities that I have a particular focus on, rural and suburban communities. And I'd love to talk about that later, but I am a party leader that wants our party to go out. To use a Latin phrase, ad extra, ad gente, to the outside, to the people, to the peripheries, because if you look at our party's history, that's when we win elections.
Could you describe a recent project that you worked on that was successful?
I would think the biggest one that really comes to mind is, once again, and this is a good understanding of who I am as a person too. I want to go back to January 26th, 2017. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, issues an executive order at 6 p.m. on 9 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night, and the first Friday of his administration, issuing what would become known as a Muslim ban. We get wind of it very early on Saturday.
It was weak.
Yeah, sorry. So I ran a nonprofit group that was focused on young Catholics. But when I say we, it was a bigger group than that. It was a movement of young people who worked in the intersection of faith and progressive politics. And so what we did is within 24 hours, we got a permit, we got an event, we had a response, we got on the front page of, we were on NBC Nightly News, we were on CBS, we got over $100,000 in contributions that we used immediately to help folks that were facing perhaps deportation hearings from that. So I am very good at moving quickly and mobilizing people around the cause, and that's my greatest skill set. My greatest skill set is, because I didn't really answer your past question, I told you my weakness is not my strength. I can mobilize quickly and get people excited behind a cause. I'm better when there's fires. And I want to do a longer term project though as well. I think that one of the things I'm very proud of in the longer term is that I have been part of a working group, that basically is trying to identify how we as a community, as a party, can meet the needs of solidarity between the rural working class and people of color in the cities. And so I was part of a group that worked through churches to actually do two types of voter registration drives in urban communities of color and in rural communities, because that's actually where our biggest weaknesses are. So those are example of long-term and short-term. But I think my biggest strength is when the fire bells ring, I can get moving quickly.
Why don't you tell us about a project recently you worked on that was not successful?
You could argue my congressional campaign wasn't successful. I think let's look at that and let's talk about what was successful and what was not successful and what I've learned from and what I didn't do well. Once again, we started late. We were out 65 days out, and we got about 12,000 votes, which is a pretty good little margin in that time period. But I think that what I'm still growing as a leader is that there is a pathway from unknown to conocer, to know about, to saber, to know. And as much as I'm a young man who is ready to go and ready to mobilize and bring people together, I think that process takes time, and it takes consistent showing up. And trust is not something that's built simply by charm or wit or vision at all. It's built by relationship. So I think we would have won that election if I got in late with a purpose. I think it was unwise of me in retrospect to get in so late. I think I should have given myself more time to actually build the relationships that we needed to win that election. But I think that one thing I would say on that is that it is noteworthy that so many, think about this, like that 12,000 people criticize me because I lived in DC for long. It is interesting that over 12,000 of my fellow citizens voted for me, even though my name recognition in that race on day one among Democrats was less than 1%. So, but that being said, I think that relationship building exercise from not knowing someone to know about, to know, is something that I still need to work on. And that's why I'm very devoted to that idea that I said on day one, that I want to go to all 95 counties. I think it's really important that you know me. And you all are the stewards of this party. You are the board of trustees. You have fiduciary responsibility, you have moral responsibility, and you are the guides of this party. So I exist only in context of you. Any power that's derived is from you. So relationships that I must maintain are with you. And then one thing I will note about that is that, you know, throughout this campaign, we've kind of gone from place to place, but I've communicated. One EC member told me, Betty Fraley, who's down in rural Winchester. We actually watched Rachel Maddow together at midnight on Christmas Eve. We had fun, but down there. She says I talked to her more in the past week than the past 2 weeks, and the current chair has talked to her in the past 4 years. And so it's once I meet someone in the flesh, I think in the campaign, I wouldn't follow up. Here, you will get annoyed with me. You will hear from me. You probably got my Christmas card. You know, you will hear from me and you will know me. But that's something I need to work on, is intentionally, continually develop relationships and trust, and not just thinking that because I showed up, it's there.
Rachel, had a follow-up?
So once you lost your race,
yes,
what did you go do to help Mariah win it?
Well, immediately what I did is I endorsed her immediately. So publicly, I think people were actually surprised by that. I don't know why I was surprised. That's what you do. I did knock on doors with the coordinated campaign. I gave her my donor list. So a few of my people actually were offered to her to knock on doors. I'm not sure what they actually did with that. And I think one thing to note, it's important, is I think it was the first time we actually had a primary in that district since God was a boy. It was a long time. And so I think that the I think that my willingness immediately to concede and give her my full-throated support was important. I also did over 4,000 robocalls. We did over 4,000 robocalls on, I believe, August 9th. If you want that, I can give you that proof, I believe. So right after the election on August 9th, saying, these were people based on our data, we thought they voted for me. And we said, I'm with Mariah. And that is very public, that I was very quick to support Mariah.
Right, I'm not disputing. I'm
So,
just wondering what work you did to elect a Democrat in that district after you
did
your election.
Yeah, so I'd say threefold. Number one, I conceded, so that's check. Number two, I offered my resources to the campaign, to Devin, who's the chair. Also, two, not just there was about 35 races in that district, so to down ballot as well. I helped other folks as well. Second thing I would say is I personally knocked on doors. My staff knocked on doors. And number three, we actually contacted our members, my folks, and said, you should vote for Mariah. And myself, I worked mostly with the coordinated, actually mostly with Dean and Bredesen on separate capacities. And I think if you talk to Mariah, I don't think Mariah wanted me front and center in that campaign. My job was to step back and support her.
I don't dispute that. I'm just wondering what work you did.
Absolutely.
I believe the proof is in the work, not in the words.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad to hear that you worked for it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too, I would say that too, is that I think that, well, actually we'll go with that for the next question. So yes.
So you got 12,000 votes. What was the percentage?
30. Yeah. So I don't think it was actually like 11,500. I got 35%. Mariah got 45%. I don't know the exact numbers, and Stephen got about 17%.
Okay.
So give or take, and you can look that up. I think that the Tennessean has that right up.
Thank you.
Okay. What do you see as the current strengths and weaknesses of the TNDP, and what would you do to make the party stronger?
It's a long question on the strengths and weaknesses, but when we highlight what I think matters the most. Number one, our people are particularly our strength. I think that the energy that I see in the party is remarkable. People are upset that new people came into the party after 2016. I do not understand that. I don't understand this need to protect the old guard alone, and even if the old guard perhaps didn't produce results. So I am the quote of famous 1950s movie, Here Comes Everyone. Like, I think we should have a big party, and I think I saw that big party come out. That does create weaknesses. There's fights. There's a lot of fights. People I have now traveled to over 69 counties in the past 2.5 weeks for this campaign. People do not like each other, and I think we should acknowledge that reality. There's a particular distrust from rural communities of resources given to Nashville. I found that Memphis has a lot of distrust of the rest of the state, and I think that these are causing real divisions. So I think if I'm going to keep rolling on the list, that's okay. Strength would be we got more candidates this time. I do think that our weakness was we waited way too late to get them. I think that I put a game plan together that says we should recruit early, but also and this might be an area of contention because I'm talking to the party. I'd like to talk about, just for a second, what I think a good candidate looks like. I think this is important. And I would not play ball. I'm not getting involved in primaries, et cetera. I think local parties, this is really important. The state is first and foremost the provider, the helper. And they can only step in if every other possibility locally has not been done. And the only and this has been asked me quite a bit, the only way I imagine myself stepping in is if there was criminal activity and that was not being resolved through the auspices of it. But I think that one of the things I think on the candidates, my ideal candidate has cachet in the party, but also cachet in the community. And this is something really in particular in rural communities. Campaigns are about distinction, so I want to make a distinction between my opponents and I. They talk about rural Tennessee. I campaigned there. I know those communities. Holly talked about Grundy County being as a place she talked about being heavily Republican. That's not reality. 6 of the 9 county commissioners in Grundy are Democrats. Democrats do really well in rural areas when the person is known, when they have cachet, when they're a business owner, when they're a doctor, when they're a pharmacist. And I think that we actually, to rebuild this party, the cities are going to be a part of it, but I have a bias. And I do think suburban and rural communities have been left behind the party structure, and I think that's a weakness. And so I want quality candidates that are good Democrats, who are unafraid to be Democrats, who won't say they're Democrat one day and then vote against our interests the other day. Real Democrats, but that also have cachet outside the party. And so I think I want the state party to actually play a heavier role in helping the local communities recruit candidates early. Another weakness that I would argue is that we do not fight back enough. I do not understand in Shelby County why we were not in a court of law fighting back against the voter oppression. I won't be holding signs in the streets when they did what they did to Carl Dean in Shelby County. I'll be in court. There are courts, there are legal rounds available to us as a party that we have not taken in a variety of issues, particularly voter rights, particularly with gerrymandering, et cetera. And so I'd like to be a part of those efforts. So let me put it another way. We haven't fought enough. We kind of lay down and die when we get not just bullied, but when there are illegal acts taken against our party and our people. And one final thing that I think I would like to mention is I think that going forward, we really need to have I mentioned this earlier, we really need to have a more cohesive structure between the movements and the party. And the way I want to do that is I don't know if we've sent this email out yet, but on February 18th in Jackson, I want to have a movements conference, and where I invite both the old groups that are part of the movements, Labor, Federation of Women, the newer groups like WTF and Emerge, Indivisible, etc. And I want to have a sober look at the reality of our state and see where we can work together and see who can take what. We don't have a good sense of the pathway forward. And my biggest criticism of the entire race is I'm still struggling to understand what the current chair's plan is going forward. She's put together 3 or 4 bullet points. I was present for the Mobilize, and to me it felt like it was an attempt to cover up some losses. We lost, and I think we should be sober about that. And I think what bothers me is the Republicans they use the movements very well. We knocked on 1 million doors, which I'm very proud of, and I think Chairman Cheney deserves a lot of credit for that. They knocked on 1.5 million doors. And the reason they did that is so over 75% of their door knocks were not through the party. They were through offhand groups, 50C4 groups, 50C3 groups. We need to be better at organizing these groups together.
All right. What are your plans for reaching out to rural and minority voters across the state?
I'm glad that you actually put those together because I think intellectually our party is very weak at separating those realities. What I want to do, and I want to kind of frame this from January 12 on, if I'm honored to serve as chair, the first thing we would do is I would visit all 95 counties. I think it's really impertinent, but I wouldn't just visit for a rebranding exercise. I would run on an issue. And so, of course, that coincides with the General Assembly meeting. And the only thing more popular in Bill Lee in the state of Tennessee is Medicaid expansion. It's Medicaid expansion. And as big, as diverse, as gritty as our party is, those numbers poll infinitely high in our party. And so the first thing I would do is 95 counties, we would start campaigning, not on candidates or rebranding the Democratic Party, but on an issue. And so what I think the first thing we do in rural communities is show up, simplify our message. Republicans run on low taxes and less government. Now, do they actually do it? No. But our message actually is not communicative, I find, and it's not sober enough for folks to catch on to. So I think that we should narrow the message to healthcare for a certain time period. And then from that, we build our roles. We actually do door knocks in these communities on. And I've identified 14 communities. I don't know if you'll get, so now that Christmas is over, you're going to get more and more from me, which I apologize for. But we've identified 14 state reps that we think are vulnerable on this issue. My campaign has, and so we knock them particularly in those communities. And from that, build our database, build our infrastructure, and build our networks. Because what happens in off years, I think we spend too much time on reorganization, quite honestly, and I don't think we spend enough time on issue mobilization. So first and foremost, show up, campaign on an issue. And the third thing I would do is actually, I think it's worth reconsidering the investments that the House caucus has made and didn't make in 2018. We didn't raise enough money, which we should go into at some point, I think. But we need to redistribute those resources down ballot, and we need to distribute those resources to rural races that are winnable. I'll give you an example. If I had $10,000 extra dollars as chair in 2019 or 2020, I'm much more likely, I think, than the current leadership to give that money to county commission races than to who's ever running for the United States Senate. Phil and Carl did not lose because they didn't have enough money. Okay, and I think that the state needs to really reinvest in not just state house races and state senate races, but down ballot races. And if you don't mind, I'll give an example in my own community. Murfreesboro, when I was born, it was 36,000 people. Now it's 6 times that amount. So I've kind of gone through the transition myself of seeing it. There's a man who's a county mayor named Bill Ketron. Bill Ketron, he ran for county commission several times, didn't win, but kept on building momentum. This is when I was born, when Tennessee was as blue as can be. He was a Republican, but they kept on supporting him, and the state kept on supporting him. They saw talent, and they saw Bill Ketron, and so he finally got a county commission seat. Then he got elected to House, and then Senate, and then mayor. And so I want to find our Bill Ketrons. I hope Jeff Yarbrough's listening. I hope John Ray Clemens is listening. I hope Mike Stewart's listening. I love y'all. I think you're great. I want to find women and men, candidates like y'all, not in Nashville. I love Nashville, but I want to find them in Cookeville. I want to find them in Winchester. They're there. I met them on the trail. Bobby Bush is a good example. These people exist, but it's the party's job to identify these young women and men and invest in them. And I don't think we're doing a good enough job at that. My candidacy is about all 95 counties. My resources will be spread out a lot more widely and smart. We won't throw things to losing prospects, but we will throw things to the future as well, particularly in rural communities.
Follow up on that.
Sure.
I've worked in a number of statewide races.
Sure.
A little over 2 decades. I can tell you that I've never worked for a statewide candidate who didn't say, I'm going to visit all 95 counties.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of being TNDP chair, so Christy and I have half of Hamilton County and half of Bradley County. And what does a Bradley County visit look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a way that I think most people would expect it to look like, and there's a way I think it should look like. I think most people would expect that I come into a room like this, and just talk to the party. Maybe it's my age, but I think that our future is not just in this room. I think it's really important. So I think the way I imagine this is, so if we're doing 95 counties, I imagine we would do is, we'd go outside the construct of the party and go to the public square, wherever that looks like, in Cleveland or wherever it might be. Maybe it's maybe it's Union or whatever it might be. And I think we actually talk about issues and organize people around issues and causes. That's why, Bernie Sanders, whether you liked him or didn't like him. What's interesting about Bernie Sanders is Bernie Sanders didn't run on his biography. He ran on an idea, and I think our part we don't have good enough biographies around here. We should run on ideas. And so when I go to these counties, I would meet with the local leadership, but immediately we would be outward looking. And so I don't think I would be the spokesperson. That's really important to me. I'm not running to be the spokesperson for a Democratic Party in all 95 counties. You have your structure, okay? But I am showing that the support is there and that there is a cohesion between us and the local parties. So I would think that I would be two-part visits. Each time we would meet with the local leadership, but we would plan some kind of event where the actual public is invited. And I think it should be around healthcare. I'm willing to fight on that topic if there's a better topic that I'm missing or I'm naive on. But I think that every visit would be outward focused, not just the internal structure of the party. Once again, to use a metaphor I'm always using, I don't want our party to be sick from being closed in on itself. We're too small right now. We need to be outward focused.
Any other follow-ups on that, or should we?
No, my follow-ups can wait.
Okay. What experience do you have electing Democrats to positions previously held by Republicans, and how did you accomplish this?
Well, I mean, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, I was on that campaign in 2008. That would be my best experience of it. And so I think in that election, though, I want to go in that election. Well, of course, in 12 as well, but as a reelect. I also worked, this is not on my resume as clearly, but I've also worked in city council races in Cincinnati, Ohio as well. But I think this is really important that in terms of like how I view it. So in 08 and 12, I worked in, once again, missionary territory, white evangelicals, particularly in Ohio, Catholics, etc. But I want to kind of go back to something I want to hone in on during this. We can win over those people without sacrificing our progressive values. I do believe that. What I think our party has struggled at in the state of Tennessee is I don't believe in one-size-fits-all messaging. I think that we need to start talking about things that are more accessible to folks in their communities. And if you don't mind, I'll provide the biggest example. During the 08 campaign, when we talked about healthcare, we made it so when we were on the ground doing field organizing, et cetera, it was very clear that we were not supposed to talk about healthcare as a fiscal issue. Tennessee, when Carl Dean ran, he talked about healthcare, Medicaid expansion as a fiscal responsibility issue. That does not resonate with people on the ground. They're thinking about their own pocketbooks and their own realities. And so we were told to talk about it as a moral issue. And this is what might get me in trouble, but I think we should engage in the culture war questions. I think we can see the culture war. The best way to give an example I would be is in healthcare. I think that the Republican Party pretends to be pro-family, pro-life, pro-Christian values, etc. But time and again, when you put it up against the test, they are not. So I think we should actually engage in those battles. That makes people uncomfortable because I understand we're a party of not just Christians, and we're a party of Jews and Muslims, and people of all faith and people of no faith. We got an issue though. 40% of this state's white evangelicals, and their turnout is second highest in the state of any demographic like that. But we're not even competing in those areas, and somehow we have to, and we don't have to by compromising our values. We can do it by framing things in a way that's accessible. And the best example I give you, and I hope this opens up some questions because I have a feeling it might, is on Medicaid expansion. We can't just talk about the fiscal responsibility of Medicaid expansion. I think we should talk about it in moral values. I mean, look, when I ran my campaign, I started at first talking like Hamilton, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe. Unfortunately, that did not work. But when I started talking about moral issues in the frame of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, people understood. So I am proposing that we talk about issues from a moral perspective, and we do not concede these tropes that have been laid against us, particularly on values.
What resources do you envision allocating for Southeast Tennessee?
That's a good question. So I think that one of the things I would say is, how do I view budgeting too? I think it's really important. And you'll get so I put together a fourfold budget. People are upset about my $7 million number, and I hope you'll ask me about that in a minute, because I want to have that conversation. But I put together a 4 framework visions of if we raise 1.5 million, 3.5 million, 5.5 million, and 7 million. But what you're going to see on that is I'm going to exercise authority in a decentralized way. I want to have 3 deputies. I think I mentioned this in my document. I want to have 3 deputies that are a part of the decision-making process. So I think that instead of promising numbers and how much dollars you'll get, I think it will be more correspondent to the realities on the ground than it currently is. I think the way the current leadership does it is that it's very Nashville-centric. I think that we need a decision-making process that begins at zero-based. So if you're familiar with the difference between zero-based budgeting, it's really building up from the realities on the ground. So I would not make a budget from a high light level. I would actually start with the ground realities before we did that. So I think that with Southeast Tennessee, obviously you have a Democratic mayor. It seems like the federal realities are going to be tough for this state for a while, for this county for a while. But I think there are a slew of races across this community that we're not invested in, from what I can understand. Once again,
Across this community, Hamilton County?
Well, my Southeast Tennessee, I apologize. Yeah, so let me clarify. I'm speaking to you, but also the entire Southeast community. And I think that my particular bias would be, I want to find the up-and-coming folks in this community. I want to find the next Andy Burks. And I want to really invest in, and this is really important. I do think it's important. My budgeting will be, yes, we're going to invest in parties, but we're also going to find it's individuals that really can lead the framework of our transformation from red to blue. So I think on the budgeting, if you look at what Mary did for fiscal years 17-18, I think that way too many of the resources went out of state to contractors and vendors and things that were, in my opinion, kind of the payday schemes of campaign life, and not enough money actually went to individuals and campaigns and organizations on the ground. So I think that way I imagine it with my 3 deputies with each grand division. I actually haven't decided. I think you all would fall under someone who's essentially served in the East Grand Division somewhere, either in Knoxville or Chattanooga. That would be the deputy I have there. But essentially, what I would do is ensure that we are investing in your high priorities. And I hope, if I can put my finger to it, I hope the priorities be on candidates in local races.
Okay.
I do have a follow-up. As you do know, Chattanooga is a majority Democratic city, but the county as a whole leans more Republican. Our state or our county mayor is a Republican.
Sure.
So how would you focus on not only the county commission races but flipping the county blue?
Yeah.
With adding to that actually every countywide official is a Republican.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that there is 2 ways I want to answer the question. No, please go ahead.
Sorry, administrative role, political jobs are all filled by Republicans.
The normal traditional way of viewing this is what has more power, right? So what has more power in legislation, in lawmaking, etc. We are so deep in the wilderness right now, though. Wins are wins. I really do believe that, and so people are going to disagree with me on that aspect. But I will fight for city races with understanding the future leaders come from these races too, even if they aren't as powerful as their county equivalents. So, for example, in Columbia, we have a Democratic mayor, a young guy, whippersnapper, who's probably going to have a great career. He would never, ever, in a million years, become Murray County mayor. But because we've given this young man a platform to exercise political power, which helps his community, he's really lifted up inner city projects within Murray or within Columbia. He's actually exercised power. So I think that my initial stance is I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to make no distinctions. That I think that city races should matter just as much. We need Democrats. We are bleeding for numbers. I think we should go on all in on wherever we can find wins.
Any other follow-ups on that? All right. How is your relationship with organized labor and other major funding sources for the party?
Sure. Well, organized labor, the biggest relationship I have with them is I was part of a group in 2014, 2015, if you remember TPP. Very controversial. It actually caused a lot of discord because my former boss supported TPP, Barack Obama, but of course the party writ large and the movement did not. So I helped lead the faith-based effort against the TPP. Once again, that might strike you as odd. Like, what does the faith-based effort against the TPP look like? Well, there's an historical marriage between labor and faith movements in this country. There's also an historical marriage between faith movements and a lot of progressive movements in this country, which we can get into at some point. But I helped lead that on a national level with Richard Trumka, with the SEIU, with the American Federations of Teachers. That being said, I do know that there's a distinction between the national groups and the local groups. I built strong relationships with the locals in 18. I was too late to get the endorsement. The AFL-CIO endorsed before I got in the race, but I still showed up. And that's something really important to understand about me is even if you tell me, you're full of BS, I'm not voting for you, I'll still show up. So I don't hold old grudges for future projects, but I think we need to put labor back front and center. I like Megan Barry, but I think Mayor Barry did not do well on contracts with labor unions. There's a lot of issues in Nashville about that. And I think we actually need to hold if I'm going to be an enforcer in some capacity, our party has thrown groups under the bus, in my opinion, consistently. And I want to name 3 right now, if you don't mind. Labor has been thrown under the bus. People of color have been thrown under the bus. And rural communities have been thrown under the bus, particularly women in rural communities with healthcare. And I think I want to switch the narrative. So on funding sources, though, labor is going to be a big part of funding, but I also think that our funding is heavily anemic, just in general. And I do think that the only way we're going to get to the levels we need to, it's not just going to be state-based organizations and state entities where we're going to get the funding. And we'll go into this later, I want to make an argument for going after national money.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So you mentioned the women being thrown under the bus, especially in rural communities with respect to healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what your thoughts and ideas are around women's health and reproductive rights.
Sure.
And what you're running against 2 women.
Sure.
And so there is sort of that, it's like the year of the woman, all these women are running. Talk a little bit about where you are with respect to women's rights and women in leadership.
So I think let's put it on 3 different capacities, if you don't mind. So we'll do Roe v. Wade, reproductive choice. We'll do women in leadership, number 2, and then I think on the 3rd capacity, I'd like to talk about particularly women in policy issues writ large. Reproductive choice. So my position is very similar to what Tim Kaine and Joe Biden said, which is they're personally pro-life. And that's from a deep religious conviction, but they respect Roe v. Wade. And not only do I deeply respect Roe v. Wade, I will do what I can as state chair to ensure that we stop any assault on reproductive choice in the state of Tennessee, particularly with issues regarding Amendment 1. I think it is because of my particular background as a Roman Catholic, I think I need to provide structural support, voice support, resources to ensure that the party is in the fight. But I acknowledge that me being the voice of reproductive rights for the state of Tennessee is not going to work. We're going to have women step up, and I'm going to have to empower women stepping up to be the voices, and I want to be an ally in that. Let me talk about that, the idea of being pro-life for a second, though, because I want to push back on something that's really important to me. I think that we always use the word pro-life as a pejorative in the progressive movement, understandably, because it has such historical connotations as such. I think that it's really important that we actually engage in a long-term effort. I'm not going to win this fight in the next 2 weeks. I think we should engage in a long-term effort to redefine pro-life versus pro-choice. 70% of voters said, Republican voters said they would never, ever vote for someone who isn't pro-life in this state. I think that we can be pro-life and support Roe v. Wade. And I think the Republican Party is not pro-life. I think at the very best, they are pro-birth, maybe. And I think that since we allow the Republicans to win that narrative, it really hurts us Look, guys, like I spent my entire summer in the ruralest and reddest parts of this state and some of the reddest parts of this country. And I know that if we can communicate on women's reproductive choice in a compelling way and maintain a vigorous defense of a woman's right to choose, but communicate in a way that's accessible to men and women, particularly in rural communities, I actually think we can get electoral wins. I really do believe that. So I know the way I framed the issue causes consternation, and I'm not in any way, I don't think me being personally pro-life should be used as a means to say that I'm against Roe v. Wade or that I'm not going to fight for reproductive choice. I think what it does, though, is open a conversation like, how do we communicate this in concise and compelling ways to the rural and red parts of this state? So once again, I believe in a Democratic Party that does not throw people under the bus. I will not throw labor on the bus. I will not throw women under the bus. I will not throw people of color under the bus. The only way, this is a moral claim, that we're going to go forward is together. But also politically, we need each other badly.
So would you put the weight of the TNDP behind expanding Planned Parenthood across the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, once again, me being pro-life,
And maybe you've already said that and I missed
Oh,
it.
no, that's completely fine. No.
Reiterate that question.
One thing I should note is, like, as I've grown throughout my 20s, I've grown. And my circle has grown.
Fucking 40.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. So I think that I've grown on my understanding of these issues and how how they affect people on the ground, the realities of reproductive rights. And so I think that for our community, women's reproductive rights is a absolute fundamental of healthcare. And so the attacks on Planned Parenthood are unacceptable. And I'll say it time and again. I think particularly you probably need to hear that from me time and again, because I know that my way of calling myself pro-life is a source of consternation. But once again, it's one I'm willing to address head on. So I'll just say that. The second thing is women in leadership. We need more women in leadership throughout the state of Tennessee. And I think we should support programs like Emerge and WTF and the Women's Federation. I'm aware of something that I am not intimately aware of, but I am intellectually, connoisseur aware of, that there are tensions in these communities, from what I can tell, about groups that don't always get along. I think one of the areas that I'd like to push for in women's leadership development, I do think the Emerge program has done a pretty good job, and WTF at going into rural communities. I want to go further. It really is important to me that we find women leaders in rural communities. We need female mayors in Franklin County. We need women electeds in rural communities. And what concerns me is the more rural you get, the less likely we are to have female Democratic electeds. I think that's something I really want to focus on. So I would say that on women's empowerment and women's leadership, we really need rural female leaders. And I really focus on that. I think it's great that we have programs in Nashville and Memphis, et cetera. But once again, my entire construct is towards the rural communities, which I think have been left out. Final thing is on writ large policy. I think that what would be really interesting is whatever you think about me, I'm not an idiot. I think people realize that. I think that we have not, time and again, really challenged the Republicans on things they say matter. I want to give you the best example. Republicans think that life begins at conception. In the state of Tennessee, Medicaid is available to pregnant women in the third trimester. Why isn't it available at conception? If the Republicans think life begins at conception, I think the state party and its elected officials should say, fine, Medicaid begins at conception too, and let's do 2 years and 9 months. So I want to take the Republican value system that they use oftentimes as a front against women and actually hold them to account on it. I think we've lost our creativity and our innovation as a party on policy and ideas like this, and I want to bring them back to the forefront. Once again, if you are pro-life, why do you not want to expand Medicaid? We know that if you're going to reduce the need of women seeking abortions, you want that in this state, expand Medicaid. We know rural hospitals and such would provide this. If you want to reduce unintended pregnancies, why don't we have required science-based sex education? My sex education was a joke in Rutherford County because the local system got to outsource it to a group of its choosing, which was driven by political choice. And if you believe that abortion is immoral, well, shouldn't we make contraception widely available to every Tennessee young adult, male and female? So I want to challenge the Republicans on these things that they say hold so dear, and say, let's play ball with that then.
We got a couple of questions.
Sure.
And then we'll give you a few minutes to wrap up, but we're getting close to the end.
Sure.
We've kind of touched on one of these. Which part or parts of the DNC platform do you disagree with, and why?
I am faithful to the DNC platform. Here's what I do disagree with, though. I think that I disagree with this. And so actually, the second, if someone has a DNC platform, I want you to read the second paragraph when you get home. Because to me, it is so important. We choose unity over division. We choose progress over stagnation. We choose tomorrow over yesterday. The Democratic Party should be the biggest vehicle for social progress in the United States. I believe that fundamentally, and I'll fight for that. I also acknowledge that the way that works is different in different parts of this state, and we're not always going to get along. And it's really important to me that I acknowledge unity over uniformity. Look, 1989, the year I was born, about 40% of the state legislature, from what I can tell from the count, was anti-choice, the Democrats. And that's wrong. They should have supported a woman's right to choose. But I do believe that having anti-choice Democrats in office is preferable to having anti-choice Republicans, particularly on questions of healthcare and the rest. So I'm a pragmatist. I can count. I know where we exist. I can do math. I want to have as progressive as people as we can, but I also acknowledge that this party is deep in the gutter right now. We know I'm religious, so I'll use a religious metaphor. A community that spends time banishing heretics is on life support, and we're too deep in the grave already to be like that. We need to seek converts. So I'm going to spend less time punishing heretics and more time seeking converts. That being said, I do think there's not a litmus test, but there is an arc of values that we need to hold our party to. And I think the party should speak out when its electeds do not hold those values, and I'm willing to do that. Yes.
Just a clarification. So are you all wanting to, for more elected officials, are you wanting just people who, as a personal conviction, are pro-life but will support keeping Roe v. Wade in place?
Sure. No, I think that we need politicians that support Roe v. Wade. Absolutely. And we need politicians that support women's reproductive rights in Tennessee. That being said, we should not, I don't think I should be punished because I have a religious conviction that was put to me at baptism. It's my worldview. It's hard to get rid of. It's something, it's in the water I drink, just like people of the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith have things in the water they drink in the world they live in. They should have welcome in our party. But I think that we need to be strong defenders of the platform in its entirety, and also realize that that's going to, how people communicate about that might not make us happy. Does that make sense? But yes, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, but I mean, as a matter of having people that we're electing, should we make sure we are electing people, while yes, they might be pro-life personally,
Sure.
that they'll vote to uphold Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, I think that that's my preference. Let me kind of be more stark on this. I think it's important to know. You should talk to my opponents about this as well. So if the primary voters choose someone who does not support Roe v. Wade, I do not think it's the place of the party to step in. And I know who agrees with me is Mary Mancini. When Don Barlow ran for U.S. Congress, Mary said, "You're good to go. The voters picked you. Okay." Holly, when she was chairwoman of the Williamson County Democratic Party, they had at least 2 or 3 folks who did not support reproductive rights, and Holly did not extinguish them and banish them. We're a pro-choice party, and that should be what we run on. That's what our values should be. But if someone goes through the nominating process of their people, of that community, and they choose someone who disagrees with us on one issue or the other, I'm not going to banish them as heretics. I'm going to let the people choose their nominees.
Let me ask a follow-up.
Sure.
I've been on this committee a lot of years.
Sure.
For my age, and we, because we didn't have a strong candidate, nominated a white supremacist for the U.S. Senate a few years
In 12,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah, so would that opinion apply to a white supremacist?
No, it's a great question. So there are definitely battle lines to be drawn, I think, and so I'm hesitant to give like the 3 or 4 like the non-negotiables, but there's definitely non-negotiables, and so I think that if that's something that really matters to the committee writ large, I would communicate in a more clear fashion what I think non-negotiables are on candidates. But I'm with Holly and Mary. They're right that people that disagree with us on choice should be allowed to run. But I don't think Charlie Brown should have been allowed to run.
We've got one more question
Sure.
prepared, and I think we've got a few just extras. So, can you name at least 2 of Mary's successes during her tenure that you think are imperative for us to build on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I want to highlight again, I'm not running against Mary because I think Mary's a bad person or that Mary's done a horrible job. I think that she inherited a really difficult situation, and her job was to stop the bleeding. I'm not sure she's the one to lead us towards the promised land, if you will. I would say that one thing that I think is admirable is that we did get more candidates to run. I think that's a really strong thing that we should be proud of. I am disappointed about the process, how that went. I thought it was too late. I thought we didn't always do the best quality control in that. We should have started earlier. I think the second strength that I would argue is that the coordinated campaign had its issues that I think would be worth talking about in the follow-up. But I think that we should be proud that we knocked on 1 billion doors in the state of Tennessee. And I think that's something that we should be very proud of. Once again, I think if we had, it's almost like, to use a farming metaphor, if the seed had been better sown, we would have had a better result. I think we sowed the seed too late. I think 1 million doors is something to be proud of. I think the fact that we had candidates run across this state is something to be proud of. I want better candidates earlier picked, and I want better more door knocks by working with movement and non-party apparatus.
Just to correct something, Charlie Brown is not a white supremacist.
It was the right. That was
our candidate for governor who lost. Mark Clayton is the white supremacist.
Charlie Brown is Charlie Brown. Yeah.
Okay, that's all the prepared questions, but I think, Rachel, you had a follow-up.
I just had a couple follow-up questions. You've mentioned all the time that you've worked outside of the state of Tennessee.
Sure.
And all of this experience you've had outside of the state of Tennessee. If you're so concerned about the state of Tennessee turning blue, why did you spend so much of your time outside of it and only come home in the last year to work in Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean,
and I don't judge you for that.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
just wondering what your reasoning was behind that.
The idea that someone can only support the state of Tennessee is not true. I was there for the implementation of Obamacare. I won an election, helped win an election along with my colleagues that ensured over 300,000 Tennesseans now have access to health care. I fought for the Muslim community in Tennessee when we fought against the Muslim ban. When we worked for comprehensive immigration reform on a national level, I was fighting for undocumented immigrants here in the state of Tennessee. There's this big thing that we like to do locally. I understand. I'm not accusing you of this, but I think that we love to punish outsiders. Say that they're questioned bona fides. I was born and bred in Tennessee. I went to public schools here, like many folks in my 20s. I had, I want to kind of take that more head on. I think that when I was 18 years old, I had a deep desire to leave home. I think like a lot of people, I had grown up in the community I've been for 18 years, and I had a deep desire to leave home. I think both in college, in service to the president, in service to my faith, I think that I found a deeper love of home. You can love things even when you're away from them, and you can serve them from afar. I'm not a soldier, but when a soldier goes overseas, he's serving his people at home. And for me, throughout the entire experience, I was serving my people in Tennessee.
That's a fair answer. That makes sense to me. Another question that I had, and we didn't ask Holly this because I don't think she was entirely or really in any way involved in it. This is just a personal question.
Sure.
there was a Twitter debacle last week.
Oh, yeah.
Christmas Twitter debacle that I think
Tweet
began
Ozzy.
with the screenshot that you took and you shared it from, or it began with something Mary responded to that is up to Mary to defend and shouldn't be defended by anyone here. Why do you feel that was an effective way to represent yourself? Because personally, I think that if you have a problem with someone, you take it to them and you deal with it. I don't think that tearing down other Democrats to make a point in ambition of a seat is the best way necessarily to go about things. But there may be a reason that I'm just not seeing. I just think that we should fight the GOP and not each other.
Sure.
So I can appreciate you saying that you are not running against Mary, you're running for Tennessee. I get that. What I don't understand is picking each other apart in that way. I don't see making necessarily a mountain out of a molehill as an effective way to use your own resources and time. Certainly not the parties.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I think that I have to be honest with you. I think that the outrage over a tweet was a bit much by the executive committee. You all, there were some folks who wanted to set up a committee ethics investigation. That's absurd. I wanted to investigate why we're losing elections. Maybe we can do an investigation on that. That would be a good investigation to have. I think that I am running against Mary and against Holly, and I've run in primaries. I think it's important to create distinctions. And I'll be honest with you, I do think that this should be a public setting. And I think that not everyone agrees with me on that, but my experience in being 29 years old and seeing some of the weaknesses and strengths of the internal process, I think that one of the things that would be really helpful and healthy is that we have an open process. That I'm glad we're putting this on Facebook Live. I think it should be done publicly. So I do want to contest Mary. I think my tweet wasn't that over the top. But what I was saying is that this is a really important job. It's the only job we pay $125,000 a job, and I don't want to focus on the money. I want to focus on results matter, and it's a public trust in this community. And I think that it is worth having a healthy contest. I think by the time we get to January 12th, all primaries of sorts have. But let me say this: if Mary wins this election, if Holly wins this election, it's over. The election ends, and I will support Holly, and I will support Mary, and we'll let bygones be bygones. We'll let the dead bury the dead. But I think it's worth having a month of really healthy and vigorous, and maybe sometimes heated discussion about our party, because I think that we're in deep trouble, and I want to have a vigorous conversation what the future looks like. But I think that the reaction to Mary's response, I don't think she should have responded like that. Put me on the record. I think that the executive committee overreacted.
Well, there's 72 of us. I don't
Sure,
think
yeah.
the executive
Yeah, that's
committee
right.
has one voice.
Absolutely. I think some.
five or six people overreacted.
I think, and let's be real. I think 5 or 6 people reacted with perhaps an agenda of sorts. Don't count me among them. I don't think it was that big.
So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
You did. Thank you.
I want to ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you know, all of the TNDP state executive committee meetings, as well as the state GOP, are open to the public.
Sure.
They're required to be in the DNC bylaws.
Sure.
So it is an open process.
Yes. Let me clarify. It is, from what I understand, structurally it's an open process, and I agree with that. You might not like this, but I think that it should be a process, and you will like this. I think it should be a popularly participated process, and so I think it's good if you hear phone calls from rank and file folk. I think it's a good thing, and so I think that part of me being extra, if you will, I think I like a big, boisterous, sometimes at the throats party that are fighting about really important questions, and I am ready to flood open the rank and file. One thing I think you should know about me is I do think I have a lot of support among rank and file Democrats who are ready to win some elections again, and they're ready for a new generation, and I think it's a good thing.
We definitely were ready to start winning again.
And I got one more follow-up, sorry. So I'm Methodist, I'm a Christian.
Sure.
And I greatly appreciate your religious convictions. Do you let your religious convictions govern your policy on LGBTQ equality?
So in 1960, John F. Kennedy spoke to Baptist preachers in Houston, Texas in August 1960, and he said, I am the president of the United States and not the representative of the Pope. I'm running to be the chairperson of the Democratic Party. I'm not here to preach a religious conviction. And in fact, in my history, if you understand like my history, I fought against the Catholic Church's discrimination of the LGBT community. That's a big part of my life. I stood in front of Pope Francis in 2015 and handed him a letter saying that the discrimination and the exclusion of the LGBT community in the Catholic Church is an affront to the gospel of Jesus Christ. A man I love very deeply, but I've stood up for LGBT equality in the church. I'm sure as hell going to stand up for LGBT equality as a chairperson of the Democratic Party. I will say that, though, I think that my conviction is that when I encounter an LGBT person, I'm encountering a child of God who deserves the dignity and the rights of every human person. So that's my Catholic faith, and I've fought for that even today.
Defend that in court?
I would defend that in court, yes, and that's something really important. I want to highlight that. We have to fight in court. I really do believe that. So I think we need to use the legal structure of this country and this state to fight for our rights in court. I feel like you had a question.
I do. I have several
Okay.
actually.
Yeah, I have one too, so maybe you're gonna get it.
I'll be here all day. I'm having fun. So
Well, so I guess my question sort of piggybacks a little bit off of Ryan's, and it's sort of coming a little bit from our audience on Facebook. Several people have been turning up questions here for you, and it goes also with like the idea of the relationship between the state party and the county parties. Sure. So we have county parties out there in Tennessee that are led and run and operated by people who are quite conservative.
Sure.
On LGBTQ issues, on social justice issues, on women's right to choose, on the whole thing. The Democratic Party is a big tent party. I think that there are folks out there who feel sort of left behind in those places, that the party isn't necessarily representing them or their values, or who they are. Specifically folks of color, people from the LGBTQ plus community. I wonder what you see the role of the state party in sort of creating culture change, really, in some of those rural communities where you have clash between folks who feel left behind and the people in leadership.
Yeah, and I think the way I answer that question is I think that I am a true believer that when you show up and you communicate your values in a compelling way with authenticity, with sincerity, but admittedly with shared experiences, like people might, I think I'm an interesting person in this way. I grew up in Murfreesboro. I kind of have this weird bridge. I spent a lot of time in DC. I kind of have this weird bridge between like the liberal communities that are the establishment, the liberal progressive communities, and also true, let's be real, like conservative rural reality as well. I want to be present in those communities. I'm not going to overturn leadership in those communities, but I'm going to fight for the marginalized in the rural communities. And I think that's really important for me to understand. I will fight for the marginalized who are marginalized within our state and within our party. It is my belief that too much of our movement on social justice issues start and end in the 5 cities of this state. And we have not done enough to lift up those in rural communities. I think I want to highlight it in this way, though. I've kind of conceptualized it in this way. Our party, going back to that working class versus civil rights and social justice class that we're kind of talking about here, we speak eloquently on civil rights and social justice, but we don't actually fight for civil rights and social justice. We do not speak eloquently on white working class. However, we actually do fight for the white working class quite hard. Why not do both? Once again, I am not the either or candidate. I choose both. I want to fight for civil rights and social justice as well as communicate it well I also want to communicate our desire to help men and women make a living. For me, that is to a social justice issue. So I'm a balancer. I believe that those are equally important. If civil rights and social justice is important, well, then surely it's also part of human dignity and flourishing to make a living for you and your family. And I disagree with the idea that those are contraposed or contrajuxted. And I'm going to do my best to be a reconciler, to build bridges between communities that might not always get along, but I also will work to ensure that the LGBT community, people of color, women, young people, we always forget about young people. Young people are not the future of this party. They are the base of this party. And I will ensure these communities are heavily involved in their local communities, and I will fight for them on the ground.
Okay, so shifting gears
Sure.
to my next question. One of the things that you have mentioned a few times in your emails is your
I'm glad people read my emails. I'm also extra on my emails, I know. So
your plan to raise $7 million.
Yes.
Can you give us
yeah, let's talk about it. So currently, this will probably fall short of $1 million from what I can tell in this cycle. And that number that we raised is just not where we need to be. The $7 million has come from 3 sources. Chip Forster was the best fundraiser we've had in the party in our history from 29 to 2010. He raised a little north of 3, a little over 3. If you actually extrapolate that out to dollars today, it's about 4.5 to 5. So he got that particularly almost entirely in state. And he also got that from mostly big donors. So I think we have 3 buckets I want to focus on. First, we need that base back. Now, if you think that 09 donors are 2019 Democratic donors, I don't know what you're drinking, because we lost a lot of that, and I would acknowledge that. However, I think a lot of those folks would consider donating again. We have lost contact with them, so I want to find them. So I think that is first source of money. I think that we can raise about $2.5 million from that bucket, which is about 50% of what Chip said in that cycle. Second area that I think we really should focus on, and everyone talks about small donor fundraising. I actually have executed small donor fundraising. That's probably the biggest source of resources I've raised in my career. I think that we can. I think that with our email list, with our mailing list, quite frankly, with a sense of new energy and leadership in the party, that can be a source of about $2 to $2.5 million as well. That's actually one of Mary's great. I know Holly kind of ties in that. Mary's actually done pretty well on that number from what I can tell. I don't think we've been vigorous enough in that effort. We are missing a whole chunk of donors between ages 23 and 45, from what you can tell. Young professionals have resources to give the Democratic Party if we find them. They're not going to respond to our mail appeals in the same way. And then the third set is where it's most controversial. I think there's out-of-state money that we can get. And why do I say that? Because other states have gotten it. Mississippi got a significant out-of-state money. Alabama got out-of-state money. Georgia got out-of-state money. South Carolina. Now, people will push back. I think it's fair to push back. Well, Mississippi State has a Democratic Attorney General. So he's got a Democratic statewide. Alabama's got Doug Jones. Georgia, I guess we don't have a statewide elected in Georgia, shockingly, but we have competitors in that. South Carolina, same way. We haven't tried it from what I can tell. We actually have not tried to tell it, but let me tell you how I would sell Tennessee out of state. I would sell Tennessee out of state not as a purple state, because I don't think people are going to buy it. I just don't think the numbers are there. And when you talk to wealthy folks, they want to buy something that they actually believe can have a victory. I think our victories, and I'm speaking in Hamilton County, so you might not like this, but I think I think the way that I've seen money, resources flow into southern states is on the argument of what Stacey Abrams did. Stacey Abrams said, I'm running in rural areas, and I'm going to compete vigorously in non-city areas. And I'd like to sell Tennessee Democratic Party as that. I think what you'll see in me is someone who, people like me or don't like me, but I think I fit well in different parts of this state. I can show up in the Murray County fish fry, but I also can represent our party in big pocket areas, not just in Tennessee, but nationwide. And I want to actually, I think that there is a moral responsibility to bring in money. And people don't like that. I understand that, but I think there's a moral responsibility. The nonprofit world, if there is no margin, there is no mission. So the $7 million, but for everyone to know, later this week, I'm not sure what our staff is doing, I have 4 tiers essentially if we hit this much, this is how we allocate it. If we hit this much, this is how we allocate it. And so I've done that in the most conservative investments. If you think I wouldn't raise a dime. If anything I'd do the levels we're doing now, I put that out there. But I think the $7 million is well within reach. I'm kind of disappointed that we actually haven't named a number ever before. I think, and at least in a decade plus, I think we should name a number and go for it.
I have one last question.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So I have a 19-year-old, she's going to school for environmental science.
At UT?
At UTC, geology.
Good for her.
So with the recent reports that we have a very limited amount of time to fix our environment,
Sure.
which will kill our economy if we don't. It'll kill people if we don't. My daughter would like to know, what are your thoughts on bringing a more environmental justice to the state of Tennessee so that it becomes an issue for our party in a good way instead of something that makes us more pro-regulation, anti-worker.
Sure. It's a great question. I think that what's interesting about it is that on climate change, so I worked on climate change from the context of a faith community. When Pope Francis, he released this famous document in 2015 on climate change. But I think particular skill set I bring in, your daughter's on board. We don't need to convince your daughter. Your daughter should come with me to the rural counties where we have to convince people to get on board. And I think, and I'll fight for this. Actually, I'll give you an example. I was in a church one time in Dunlap, Tennessee, not far from here actually. And I was talking to the pastor, and he said, he said during the sermon that climate change was a joke, and I thought that was problematic as a Christian. And we started talking afterwards. I said, Pastor, what was God's first command to humanity in Genesis? And it was to protect creation. I think if we start framing things in ways that communities can understand, let's not fight about climate change. We're never going to convince them. But let's actually make an argument that we should protect creation. We should be stewards of creation. And so what I want to do, we could talk about climate change in terms of environmental racism. I think it's a real conversation to have. Young people of color are more likely to have asthma than white people in the state. We can talk about it in different ways, is what I'm getting at. And so I think the way you talk about these issues, we've lacked our ability to be creative and innovative. And I want to be a party chair that helps us talk about climate change in a way that connects in Dunlap, Tennessee, and connects in Memphis, Tennessee. And they're not going to be the same way. That's fine. We are not. I'm not the candidate of uniformity. Pick someone else. I think unity can be creative in how we get there. So I think we fight climate change by communicating in a way that is accessible to the folks that disagree.
Okay, good. I have no more questions.
All right, so we'll give you another minute to 2 minutes to just kind of wrap up and give us a concluding statement, and then we're done.
Well, I had a blast. This was enjoyable. So thank you for having me here. I think that you have a question that you should think about as stewards of the party and rank and file folks across the state and county chairs. You are stewards of the Democratic Party. You have a moral obligation, a fiduciary responsibility, a political obligation to your family, to your community, that our party be stronger than it is today. The status quo is not working. We can hide behind the amount of retweets we have. We can hide about the candidates we had, many of whom did not get the resources they needed to win elections. But at the end of the day, it's about the scoreboard. And the scoreboard says things are not going well. One candidate says that if we just keep going down the same route, that we're doing the right thing. The other candidate has not communicated a deep, detailed vision of how we get there, and I have. If you are satisfied with losing elections day in and day out, and if you think that's the right route we should go on, I'm not your guy. I'm not your person. But if you're willing to take a chance on someone who clearly has some experience, has a compelling vision, has an ability to connect with people across different parts of this state, and who has the energy and drive and spirit and willingness to work with anyone, friend or foe, skeptic, proponent, to win elections, I'm who you're looking for. I have spent my life building bridges, making change, on the run, close to people. I'm ready to work with you all, the stewards of our party, to start winning elections. So I'll simply leave you with this. The way you should view this question about who the next chair is in 2 ways. November 3rd, 2020. Can you really look at yourself and say that when we had a chance to make a change, we stuck with the status quo? And then I want you to reflect on November 6th, 2040. Who's going to be the person that can energize a new generation of Democrats who we so desperately need to make this state blue? And it's not just for politics. We know this. It's for our families. It's for our children. It's for our posterity. That's why we do politics. I began by saying that politics is a noble vocation and in service of the community and the people. And I am the person that can put democratic politics in the hands of the people, win elections, create change, inspire a new generation, and win in surprising places and compete in all 95 counties. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And that concludes the interview today, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank y'all.